Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you yet another installment of Sentai Origins with Raptor, presented by Hirotaku.com. Raptor, how you doing, man?
I'm well. It's good to be back, seeing after you cause major controversies while I'm gone.
That is a point of debate. However, we're going to talk about something that's less controversial, and that will be the next Sentai series in our order here, which would be Goggle 5, or the Great Squadron Goggle 5.
大戦隊ゴーグルファイブ.
Yes. Now, this show aired February 6th, 1982, and surprisingly, the Ranger Wiki really doesn't have any information on the production of this series, so there isn't much to go ahead and say about it after the Sun Vulcan, basically. But of interesting note, and I don't know how accurate this information is, but it just sounds too cool to pass up, is that the original name for this series was Go-Go 5. Which, as we all know, eventually did become a series on its own.
Yeah, which, for those of you who may be unfamiliar, Go-Go 5 is the basis for Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue.
Yes. But we're talking about long ago with the Goggle 5. Now, I want to really talk about what the story is in this, but I'm going to be honest with you, Raptor. There isn't much story going on.
No, it's not. It doesn't really attempt to create its own universe.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about the Sentais that have started out so far is they've established the threat, they've established how the team is being organized through what organization. Because again, this is all kind of set up through military organizations in the early seasons. Mm-hmm. And then we get going with, gathering the Rangers together and then fighting the thing. But each one is different in some way. Like Denzi Man, it's a dog from outer space.
Yes.
And then in not Battle Fever J.
Sun Vulcan?
Not Sun Vulcan.
Denzi Man? No, not Denzi Man.
Jacka.
Jacka.
In Jacka, they become cyborgs. They volunteer to become cyborgs. So there's something interesting and put a different twist on the show each time. Because as you would point out to me, they are kind of blending together at times, but that's only because this is so early within the series run that they didn't branch out from a lot of the same story elements, which is this science-based
Also,
stuff.
From Denzi Man to Goggle 5, the suits are very similar.
They are similar with the exception of the headpiece, which, as I have pointed out, I think is the worst-looking headpiece in Sentai. But the story as is that there is this ancient group of dark science users who live in a castle under the ocean called Deathtopia, who have destroyed several civilizations throughout history, great civilizations as they refer to, and now they're on their way to Japan.
Yes.
Now, Raptor, I just want to bring up for a quick moment something that I kind of noticed here, and I want your comment on it. Now, each of the Goggle 5 are represented by different lost civilizations.
Along with a different precious stone.
Yes, but to the civilizations, we have Atlantis, Egypt, the Incan Empire, Angkor Wat, and Lemuria.
Yes.
Okay. So the director in the episode, we'll get to him in a minute, points out that these are 5 civilizations that they destroyed. And now their next target is Japan. Now, I just find it kind of amusing that after these 5 great civilizations they defeated, the next one is 1980s Japan.
Yes, but keep in mind that ethnocentrism is really... It's endemic to really any show because, face it, if there was a Power Rangers adaptation and it followed the plot closely, it'd be them coming to destroy America. And I know that you can make arguments for America being the next great empire, but the point is, wherever this show would have taken place, it would have done that. So I don't think it's that.
But it's also the gap between the last civilizations and then Japan.
But also,
so that's kind of funny.
Yeah, comparing the dynasties of Egypt, a friggin' lost continent, and Angkor Wat to post-war Japan, yeah, that's...
And I do
Stretching
like Atlantis, of course, is fictional. However, in Sentai, Atlantis did exist, and we'll eventually get there with the first episode of Bokanger. So just something to keep in mind for future viewings.
Also, Lemuria it was never really confirmed to be real. It was a hypothetical lost continent.
Okay.
But so it's as fictional as Atlantis.
Okay. So at least we know that two of them are made up.
Yes.
But the series basically begins with this scientist who's the leader of I believe it's the Great Science Division, or the Future Science Institute, is what he calls it, is basically going to a castle in Germany to research like missing scientists, I believe is what it is. Now, the funny thing is, when this whole intro started, I kind of was thinking like Germany and castles, and I was like, oh, so
is there
not
Dr. Frankenstein around
No,
here?
no, I'm thinking like Nazi scientists kind of stuff, like Al Hellboy and all that with the occult and whatnot and stuff. But of course,
that would be a cool Sentai villain.
Now, there's probably some sort of connection with it, but again, once you start putting Germany and Nazis and stuff in there, but that's not the direct link that they make. But I guess one could infer that in some way.
Well, they're the boss of the what was it, the Dark Death? The
Death Dark.
Yeah, the Destaku. He was referred to as the Führer.
Yes. So, I've always wondered about Sentai's relation or understanding of pre-war Japan and war Japan, or wartime Japan. And this is just it's kind of funny to me to look at it in that context. But anyway, he's out there trying to find these scientists. He runs into the Death Dark, right?
Yep.
And then he runs into this guy who's spelunking in the castle and all that, and they get into a battle, the first incursion of them.
Yeah, we meet their henchmen. I didn't get a name on the henchmen, but they're
robots in military camo.
Yeah, so we very firmly moved away from humans being the henchmen.
Absolutely, and I think with the fact that we have the guns going off and stuff, and the more violent that they're getting, I mean, it's not like they're still violent.
But the violence isn't as striking as it was in Go Ranger
or Battle Fever J. Definitely,
it's definitely moving away from it.
Yeah, and I think the idea is like again, in American standards, they usually have a lot of robots in shows because you can do anything to a robot.
Exactly.
Because you can decapitate them. And I assume that Japan was kind of moving in that direction. Not to mention with what I believe is going on with Goggle 5 would also lead credence to that. But let's kind of move on with the plot. So they escape, basically, and then next we get the voiceover talking about how Goggle 5 is an organization that's part of the Future Science Institute. And they began the process of finding the 5 candidates to become the Goggle 5.
Yeah, and it's good to note that the task of finding the candidates for the Goggle 5 are left to the computer kids.
Now that is the weirdest thing about this episode, and that's saying a lot given what we've covered in Sentai, of course. And I'll get on to what my themes and what's going on about this show, but the weird thing is that, so basically, we have this group of 5 kids who I'm going to assume are like Mensa-level geniuses to be where they are.
Probably.
They are in charge of finding the 5 candidates to be the Goggle 5. I mean, how do you feel about that? Because it's one thing when Zordon just picks randomly, or you go through the military files of, naval officers and stuff like that. But it's a completely different thing when you leave up to 5 children to decide.
Well, 5 children that are assumed to be geniuses who are also using advanced computer programs, so it's not as bad as it initially seems.
Yeah, of all the ways to choose candidates, this is a unique one,
yes,
I will say.
Sure.
Because the director, other than Goggle Red, who personally saved his life, doesn't seem to have any input in the other 4 choices.
Yes.
So, I don't know. Obviously it works well because Goggle 5 is looked back as one of the great Sentai teams and stuff like that, or at least, as Guy would put it, they're all legendary and stuff. But it worked out because they won. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, of course, we get the montage of the kids going to find them. And, we have the archetype Yellow working at a zoo.
He's fat and clumsy.
Yeah, we have the Pink Ranger who's doing something
Gymnastics.
girly, which is, again, that seems to be a recurring thing because every time a girl's introduced, they're associated with things that females typically do. Horseback riding,
I don't think that we're going to get our tomboy female until we start getting 2 girls per team.
Yeah, absolutely. But it just seems that that's always a weird way. And even when they introduce females who are not part of the team, such as in Sun Vulcan, they're still doing sports that typically are thought of women. Because, I'm going to be honest, other than Michael Phelps, I can't think of very many male swimmers. That always that in synchronized swimming seems to be to women. Not that I'm criticizing, I'm just saying that there is a pattern in these Sentai.
It's association.
To associate women with these things. So that is kind of odd. The Blue Ranger is a hockey player, which is, I think it's the first time I've ever seen hockey referenced in anything Japanese.
Yes, and then what was the name of that game that Black was playing?
I didn't catch the name of it, but it's some Japanese game, and he was like
some kind of board game.
Yeah, and he was like, I think he's either a college student or a professor.
He said that he was stayed to be the captain of his school's club for that.
Yeah, so he seems to be the most probably intellectual of the group based on just his initial appearance.
Yes.
And it seems like he's also second in command, but we can get to that in a bit. And so, of course, they all get them together, and then just like magic, it's basically like, you're Goggle 5. Okay, we'll fight evil. And then they leave, fight the monster, form the robot, win the day. And that's the rest of the episode, to be honest. The most interesting aspect of it was built up in the first act with the mystery of what's going on at the castle and all that kind of stuff.
One thing I'd like to point out, though, is that after they beat up the monster, the monster isn't enlarged. The Death Dark send out a robot, the Fan Kong, for it to pilot.
Yes, and that's the first time we've seen that in Sentai. And I don't think we're probably going to see that again until Deca Ranger and then Go Buster.
Which is a cool idea. It's because I'm sure it addresses the strange idea of always enlarging your monster.
And let me correct myself. Go Buster, they didn't pilot it, but they would have a small version and then a secondary
But they were distinctly separate creations.
Exactly. So that's what it is. It's not growing the monster in this season. And I did check. There are several Kongs throughout the series, so it does seem like it's something that will continue.
Yes.
Yeah. As far as the action sequence, a couple of things strike me. One, the editing has gotten much better. A lot of interesting effects. I love the effect where all 5 of them are falling off together off the roof. I don't think I've ever seen that in a Sentai.
Yeah, it's a cool stunt.
Yeah, that's something I wish I kind of did a little bit more often. And with the fight sequence, like you had said, there are a lot of running themes in this. And one of them is gymnastics, basically, to where their weapons are gymnastic. Clubs, rope, ribbons, hula hoop, a ball. And Raptor, why don't you speak to that for a second?
Yeah, so the weapons in this season leave a lot to be desired. Red uses a rope, and blue uses a hula hoop. Black uses clubs, which is really the only thing out of this group that you would associate with being a weapon. And then Pink used a ribbon, and Yellow used a yellow volleyball.
Yeah, and I understand the ball with the Super Sentai ball and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of makes sense. But again, they're good.
However, most of his attack consists of just distracting the
robots
with his mad skills. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's not Michael Jordan, so I don't know exactly what
and only then did he launch the thing and try to make an attack out of it.
Yeah. And the Robo Mecha sequence was kind of interesting, kind of slow, but I'm sure for the time it was pretty fast paced and all that. In this season, we get 3 pieces, each piloted by a different ranger, but the base is still piloted by Pink and Black.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Red, blue, and yellow each get their own vehicle, while Pink and Black, as Barkeep said, pilot the base. Now, when the robot combines, Pink and Black do not join. They remain in the base.
Yeah, the base doesn't do anything because a lot of the carriers in the beginning of the show would actually attack and do something, but here they're not really doing that. They're just kind of like sitting on the sidelines and waiting their turn.
And maybe we should check this. We should have checked to see if that changed. To see if Pink and Black eventually did show up in the cockpit.
Well, they didn't have a singular cockpit because
You're
when
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think probably what changed, maybe they got active somewhere down the line and actually like the base fired weapons and all that. But it seemed pretty useless because even like Shark had attacks. And the one from Dinsey Man, it had attacks as well. This one did not have any attacks to it. Raptor, any other comments that you have regarding anything we've covered so far, something we didn't cover? Because I want to get to a significant point, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
Well, as I was saying, there is a jumble of themes.
Yes.
A lot of Sentais have a few clear running themes, but this one felt very jumbled because, as you already said, their attacks and weapons and techniques are based on gymnastics. But also, they supposedly take power from ancient civilizations.
And also, they have different gemstones.
Precious stones.
Yeah.
In their helmets. And these things, they don't really mesh together well.
Yeah, because I don't know how you put, say, rubies in Atlantis together. What's the clear connection there exactly?
Yeah, and really it only connects to the fact that it's the Red Ranger using it.
Yeah, and I find it odd. Now, emeralds come in all colors, but have you heard of black emerald?
No, they should have used onyx if you think about it.
Yeah, but whatever the case may be, that was the Black Rangers.
And then pink for a diamond. Yeah, there's such thing as pink diamonds, but most of the time when you think of diamond, you think of something clear.
They had pink diamond in Operation Overdrive.
Okay, that works.
So, actually, I was thinking it was a pink emerald. All right, whatever it was. But I want to get to something that it just struck me as odd, and when you think about it as a whole, so I really think that Goggle 5 was Toei's attempt to be more kid-friendly. And let me give you a couple examples. One, the violence is not as overt as we've had before. There's no stabbing, no decapitations, or cutting off of hands and stuff like that.
Me, yes.
The foot soldiers are clearly machines, and that is established within the first 5 seconds of their introduction. The villains drive giant robots, which, even though they're bisected, they're robots. We have the computer kids. And the way in which they get into the base is going into a telephone booth and riding a giant slide. And then, of course, again, we talk about the rhythm, the gymnastics and so forth. So the way I look at it is Goggle 5 was probably an attempt to be more kid-friendly in Japan with all the elements I mentioned. Plus, you know how Power Rangers are always doing things like eat right and get active and all that. Well, what better way to get active than having your heroes perform stuff you would do in school, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, Raptor, do you think I'm just full of it
no,
on that?
I am in complete agreement with you on there. I think, and maybe even the ancient civilizations thing, minus the fictional ones, may have been a ploy of history.
Could be, yeah, make them aware of those civilizations. I could definitely see that. Because it definitely seems like the series, I don't necessarily say it's going to try and teach them anything, but it's going to relate to more things that kids do, like, again, the activities and all that.
Yellow likes animals, but that wasn't really anything new for Sentai at that point.
Yeah, and even if you look at the stuff that they do. I mean, like, hockey, that's something kids do. Whatever that game was that Black was playing, I'm sure that's something kids do, even in elementary schools and all that. Rhythm gymnastics and then animals. I mean, it seems like these are all kid-friendly things. It's not like...
And also, consider at the end of the episode, when they return to the base after defeating the robot, they hug the kids, throw them up.
Yeah, they're like you were part of the team, and it's kind of like in the extreme or in the real Ghostbusters, they had the junior Ghostbuster team. They always had that little team of of kids in the 80s at least that looked up to the older group.
Now, keep in mind, this is something that Zoo Ranger would catch a lot of flack for years later.
For having the kids in there, but of course those kids were not main characters. It would occur to me that these kids are going to come back.
But there are a lot of kids. Yeah, these kids I'm assuming are in at least every episode.
Yeah,
they're face it, main characters.
Yeah, I mean, and given that, I mean that's about 11 main characters, not including say the villains.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, let's talk about the villains real quick because there isn't much to really say.
The problem with these villains is that they seem very undefined.
It is the first episode, but yeah,
they have the appearance of these dark gothic villains, but they're explicitly stated to be scientists.
Yeah, they use dark science versus Goggle V, which uses science of justice. Yeah, because there is definitely a gothic feeling about them because Deathtopia is a castle.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like the layout of it and the look of it because it actually looks like they're in a real dungeon as opposed to...
Right, and you'd expect a gang of evil scientists to have a more high-tech looking base and more high-tech appearance.
But this is also a group that has been around since ancient times as well.
Right, but it's still, when you hear the word scientist, that's not what you think of.
Yeah, so I don't know what their view of science is. It kind of reminds me of the Battle Fever J villains, that they use like mysticism, but technology is also being used, even though they're against technology.
Maybe this discussion of science is also part of a kid-friendly theme.
Yeah, possibly, because again, we don't have an occult in there, no religious, nothing mystical in this season, or at least as it's indicated here.
At least with the villains, but the heroes, you can argue, have a mystical connection in that they're fueled by an ancient civilization.
Yeah, but it definitely falls into the category of Earth technology.
Yes, agreed.
So, well, Raptor, again, I can't think of much else to say because I'm going to have to say, in general, it's a pretty bland first episode compared to what we've seen. Because the others, at least, again, had the different intrigues, different storylines going on, whether it be murder of a father, which happened twice now that I think about it, or just like the military assault and Go Ranger and all that. There's just all these different things going on. This seems to be pretty straightforward.
I would argue that at this point, Toei was settling into a Super Sentai groove.
They found their way. They understand what worked, what didn't. Because again, with the previous season, we had Sun Vulcan with 3 Rangers. And
now consider the first 4, if you look at them in order, are very different from each other. At least when it comes to terms of themes and powers.
And not to mention stories. Their stories are different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because you go from secret agents to
cyborgs
to dancing representations with international themes to
space dogs.
Yeah. And then you get Sun Vulcan, which took a lot of inspiration from Densey Man.
And did military themed.
And then you get this. It's just there.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Again, it's kind of bland. Is it the worst we've seen so far? I don't think so. It's just very...
No, Densey Man's the one I'd like least so far.
I just want to say it's very uninspiring is the way I'll put it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So, any other comments that you had before we sign off today?
Not really. I'm not looking forward to Dynaman. I do not like those suits.
Well, I'm looking forward to it because the further we get, the more we get into, I think, some of the more interesting Sentais as far as like costume designs in the 80s and stuff like that.
I'm looking forward to finally getting to Jetman and then getting to Zoo Ranger, getting over the Power Rangers hump, as I call it.
Okay, then. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. In the comments below will be a link to the first episode of Goggle 5, so if you want to go ahead and watch that first, go ahead and do that, although I wish I probably should have told you at the beginning of the podcast. But definitely go ahead and watch it and leave your comments and thoughts about it. Otherwise, Raptor, thank you for joining me again.
Great to be here as always.
You guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and the tavern is now closed.